Clara gripped Roderick's wrist tightly, her eyes fixed on his as the storm rattled the windows of the main house. "It wasn't the 20th, her voice trembling. "I lied." He stepped back, confused. "Received your letter before I tore it up. I came back because I saw you feeding your children alone, trying to be both father and mother at the same time." The silence that followed weighed more heavily than all the unspoken words between them. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. Dawn slowly broke over Three Palms Ranch, deep in rural Kentucky. The sky still held the last traces of darkness when Roderick Allencourt lit the oil lamp in his study. At 42, this tall, broad-shouldered man carried marks on his face that went far beyond the years he had lived. They were furrows of exhaustion, sleepless nights, of a loneliness stone in his chest. He picked up the quill pen, dipped it in ink, and began. It was the 20th letter, 20 attempts to find someone who would agree to this hard life. This house full of children, and devoid of his wife, Marianne, had passed away 3 years earlier, taken by a fever. She left behind 7 children, the youngest just 2 years old, and a husband who didn't know how to mend clothes, cook beans, or braid a girl's hair. "I write this letter not out of hope, but out of necessity," he began, the words heavy. "I am a widower, father of 7, owner of lands that prosper while my home languishes. I do not promise love, but I promise respect. I do not offer luxury, but I offer a safe roof and abundant food. If there is enough courage in your heart to start anew, come." Three Palms Ranch. He sealed the letter with the family seal and left it on the table. Outside, the rooster crowed, announcing another day. Roderick stood up, rubbed his face with his hand, and went to wake his children. The routine always began the same way. Prepare the porridge, dress the little one, send the older ones to the makeshift school in the chapel, tend to the ranch, return, make lunch, supervise chores, prepare dinner, bathe them, put them to bed, all alone, all in silence. The hired hands helped where they could, but there were things that the rough hands of farm men didn't know how to do. How to calm little Helen, 5 years old, who cried for her mother every night. How to explain to Joel, 8 years old, why he needed to be the man of the house when he was still a child. How to teach Beatrice, 12, that she didn't need to replace anyone's mother. The days dragged on, each one like the last. Roderick woke up, worked, cared, slept, and started again. The letters he wrote always came back the same way, unanswered or with polite refusals. "I appreciate the offer, but unfortunately, my situation, 7 children is a challenge that..." He didn't blame them. He knew he was asking a lot. He knew he offered little beyond hard work and heavy responsibility. But that morning, when the messenger arrived galloping down the dirt road, something was different. The man dismounted from his sweaty horse and handed him an envelope. Roderick took it with hand, trembled slightly. He opened it slowly, like someone opening a verdict. The handwriting was simple, unadorned, but firm. "Mr. Allencourt, I received your letter. My name is Clara Santos. I'm 36 years old, a widow and mother of 6 children. My husband passed away 2 years ago, taken by an accident during the railroad construction. I live in a town too small for so many mouths, and hunger knocks at my door every winter. I write to you not out of hope, but of courage. If you accept me as I, with my brood, my sorrow will come. I do not promise to be the wife you lost. I promise only to try. Clara." Roderick read the letter 3 times, then 4. He sat down heavily in his chair and stared at as if the words might disappear. None of the other letters had been like this. So direct, so honest, so human. He replied the same day. "Clara, come. The house is ready. Life here is not easy, but it is honest. I'm sending money for the journey." Guy. Roderick. 2 weeks later, on a drizzly afternoon, Clara arrived. The carriage stopped in front of the ranch's iron gate, and Roderick, who waited on the porch with his 7 children lined up, felt his heart quicken. When she stepped down, he saw a thin woman, her face marked by sun and time, wearing a simple dress covered in road dust. Behind her, 6 children disembarked, from oldest to youngest, all with wide eyes before the enormous house. The silence was broken by John, Roderick's youngest, who let go of his brother's hand and ran towards Clara. "Are you our new mommy?" he asked, his voice high and full of hope. Clara knelt in front of the boy. Despite her legs aching from the journey, her eyes welled up with tears that she held back fiercely. Not yet, my little one, but I can try to take care of you all. It was the first time in 3 years that Roderick had seen anything resembling tenderness within that house. The first few days were strange. The main house, which once housed 7 people, now accommodated 14. The space was large, but living together was not easy. Roderick's children looked at Clara's suspicion. Clara's children observed everything, afraid of breaking something, of taking up too much space, of bothering anyone. Clara slept in the sewing room, a small room at the end of the hall. Roderick insisted on giving her one of the main bedroom views. I didn't come to take anyone's place, she said, firm. I came to help. Meals were tense. The large, solid wood table, which once had empty seats, was now crowded. Clara cooked with the help of her older daughters, trying to adapt her small-town recipes to the large wood-burning stove in that enormous kitchen. Roderick ate in silence, observing. Beatrice, Roderick's eldest daughter, the first to resist. At 12, she had taken on the role of the woman of the house. Mother died. She washed, ironed, cared for her younger siblings. Clara's arrival seemed like a threat to her place, to her importance. One morning, when Clara tried to teach a different way to cook rice, Beatrice exploded. My mother did it differently, she cried, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She cooked better. She knew how we liked it. The silence that followed was heavy. Clara stopped what she was doing, wiped her hands on her apron, and approached the girl. Unlike me, I know your mother was better than me at everything, her voice low, and I'll never be able to replace her. I didn't come here to erase her memory. I came because you all need someone, and I need a place. But if you teach me how your mother did it, I'll learn. Will you teach me? Beatrice looked confused. No one had ever asked for her opinion. She swallowed hard, and after a long moment, picked up the bag of rice. She washed it 3 times, she murmured, and put in a bay leaf. Clara smiled faintly. Then that's how we'll do it. It was the first step, small but important. Clara's children also faced their own battle. Peter, the eldest at 14, felt diminished by depending on others, charity. Michael, 10, constantly argued with Joel, also 8, over toys and territory. The younger girls whimpered with homesickness for their old house, however poor it had been. Roderick tried to maintain order with firmness, but without violence. He divided chores among everyone, without distinction. The boys tended to the animals. The girls helped in the house. Everyone studied together with the teacher who came 3 times a week. Everyone ate from the same pot. One night, after the children were asleep, Clara found Roderick sitting on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. She hesitated before approaching, but he gestured for her to sit. Is it hard? He asked, without looking at her. It is, Clara replied, honestly, but I've lived through worse. Roderick took a long drag. They'll get used to it. They just need time. And you? Clara turned to him. Are you getting used to it? He finally looked at her. In the dim light of the oil lamp, Clara saw weariness in his eyes, but also something that looked like gratitude. I woke up today and didn't have to make breakfast alone. It's hoarse. It's been 3 years since I woke up like... So yes, I'm getting used to it. Clara nodded in silence, listening to the crickets and the wind and the trees. It was a comfortable silence, different from the tense silences of meals. Winter arrived with a vengeance. The frosty mornings forced everyone to get up earlier, and the nights were far too long. It was on one of those nights that Clara showed her strength. Helen, Roderick's youngest, woke in the middle of the night with a high fever. The girl cried inconsolably, calling for the mother who would never return. Roderick held her, desperate, not knowing what to do. It was Clara who entered the room, barefoot and in her simple nightgown, and extended her. Let me care for her. Her voice calm. Roderick hesitated, but the girl's fever was rising. He handed her to Clara, who took her to the kitchen. She prepared an herbal tea, dampened cloths in cold water, softly sang a lullaby her own mother used to sing. Helen, exhausted from crying, eventually fell asleep in Clara's arms, her fever gradually subsiding. When Roderick came down in the morning, he found Clara asleep sitting in a kitchen chair. Helen nestled in her lap. Something stirred within his chest. It wasn't love, Bumpy, not yet, but it was recognition, respect. From that day on, things subtly changed. The children began to accept Clara not as a mother, but as a necessary and comforting presence. Her children relaxed, realizing they wouldn't be expelled, that this place was theirs now, too. The local church cost, however, didn't see things the same way. Father Augustus, a rigid man with old-fashioned ideas, heard rumors about the widowed rancher living under the same roof with a widow without matrimonial ties. One Sunday afternoon, He went to the ranch. Roderick received him in the living room, the most formal part of the. Clara stayed in the kitchen. Could hear the Mr. Allen, I have come out of concern for reputation. Speak, father. It is unseemly for you to live under the same roof as this woman without the sacrament of marriage. Tongues are wagging, and it's not good for your children. Clara cares for the children, Roderick said, controlling his. She eats at the same table, sleeps in another room. There is nothing unseemly. In the eyes of God and the community, there is, the priest insisted. You must regularize this situation. Marry her or send her away. Roderick remained silent for a long moment. In the kitchen, Clara gripped the hem of her apron tightly, her heart pounding. She knew this day would come. She knew that outside opinion carried weight, especially in a small place like. When the priest left, Roderick went to the kitchen. Clara stood with her back to him, stirring a pot on the stove, her hands trembling. Clara, he said, and she turned around. I need to talk to you, she nodded, bracing herself. The priest is right about one thing, Roderick began, choosing his words carefully. People talk, and they will continue to talk. This could affect the children, both mine and yours. Clara, I understand. I can pack my things and... No, he interrupted her. That's not what I'm saying. Confused. I'm asking if you would agree to marry me, he said directly. Not for love, because it would be a lie to say there is love between us now, but for decency, for protection, so that no one can speak ill of the children. Clara was silent. It wasn't the marriage proposal she had dreamed of in her youth, but youth had long passed. What he offered was practical, honest. It was more than she had expected. I accept, her voice firm. The wedding took place on a Saturday morning in the ranch's small chapel. There was no celebration, no guests beyond the priest, Mrs. Margaret, the house, the children. Clara wore a simple dress she had altered herself, and Roderick wore the dark suit he kept for special occasion. The children watched in silent curiosity, others with lingering resistance. When the priest asked if they accepted each other, both Roderick and Clara answered, I do, with firm voices, without hesitation. They did not exchange rings, just a formal handshake that sealed the agreement. After the ceremony, life continued almost the same. Clara still slept in the sewing room. Roderick still worked from dawn till dusk. The difference was that now, in the eyes of the law and the church, they were husband and wife. The neighborhood gossip quieted down, and the children, little by little, began to introduce themselves as siblings. Months passed. The ranch prospered. The harvest was abundant. The animals multiplied. And the house, once silent and cold, began to come alive. Clara had a knack for organizing, for making the most of what they had, for turning leftovers into hearty meals. Roderick noticed the small details, the washed curtains, the flowers in the living room vault, the smell of fresh bread in the morning. One afternoon, while mending clothes on the porch, Clara hummed softly. Roderick passed by her carrying a sack of corn and stopped, surprised. It had been years since he had heard music. Her voice was simple but pleasant. He stood there, just listening, until she noticed him and embarrassed. Keep going, his voice softer than usual. It's beautiful. Clara smiled faintly and resumed humming, and Roderick went on his way with something warm in his chest. The children also changed. Beatrice, who had resisted so much at first, began to ask Clara for advice on girlish things. Michael and Joel became inseparable, getting into mischief together, getting scolded together. Peter, Clara's eldest son, took on a leadership role among the younger ones, helping Roderick with the heavier ranch task. But not everything was harmony. Anne, Clara's 9-year-old daughter, had frequent nightmares and woke up screaming. One particularly difficult night, it was Roderick who found her trembling in the hallway. He picked her up, something he rarely did with Clara's children, and carried her back to bed. He sat beside her until she fell asleep again. The next morning, Anne sought Roderick in the stable. Thank you, she said, her voice small, for taking care of me yesterday. Roderick wiped his hands on a cloth and knelt in front of her. But you live in this house, serious. That makes you my responsibility too. Understand? Anne nodded, and for the first time since she arrived, she truly. Summer arrived with heavy rains that threatened the crops. Roderick spent entire days in the fields trying to salvage what he could. He would return home exhausted, covered in mud, his calloused hands bleeding in some spot. Clara would prepare a hot bath, a hearty meal, and tend to his wounds without saying much. It was a silent but constant care. One particularly violent stormy night, Roderick couldn't make it home. He was trapped in one of the distant cabins, waiting for the rain to pass. Clara stayed awake all night, looking out the window, her heart heavy with worry. When he finally returned in the morning, drenched and shivering from the cold, she rushed to meet him. "Are you all right?" she asked, her hands touching his face, checking if he was hurt. Roderick gestured by the genuine concern in her eyes. "I am, just wet. Come, you need to dry off and eat something." She pulled him by the hand and he allowed it. That day, something changed. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't announced. It was just a gradual realization. This woman, who had arrived as a practical solution to a problem, was becoming important, necessary in a way that went beyond household chores. The closest neighbors, the Matthews couple, paid a visit one Sunday afternoon. They came with curiosity thinly disguised as courtesy, wanting to see how the situation was at Three Palms Ranch. They found an organized house, well-behaved and well-cared for children, and a couple who, though not effusive, showed mutual respect. "You two seem quite settled," commented Mrs. Teresa, with a smile that didn't reach her eye. "We're doing the best we can," Clara wrote. "And the children, do they get along well?" the woman pressed. "They get along like siblings," Roderick interjected, his tone making it clear he wouldn't. "They fight, they make up, they grow up together." The visit was short, and when the Matthews left, Clara sighed with relief. "They came for gossip," she murmured. "Let them come," Roderick said, surprising her. "They won't find anything to talk about?" Clara looked at him and, for the first time, saw not just the practical man who had made a marriage proposal out of necessity, but someone who defended her, someone who saw her as part of something larger. That night, after the children were asleep, Roderick asked Clara to sit with him in the living room. She found it strange, but obeyed, her hands nervous in her lap. "I want to talk about something," a little awkwardly. "You still sleep in the sewing room?" Clara felt her heart quicken. Yes, that was the agreement. "I'm not demanding anything," interrupted her. "But I think, well, you are my wife in everyone's eyes. Perhaps it's time to change that, for real." Clara was silent, processing. "Are you saying that?" "I'm saying I'd like you to move into the main bedroom," he completed, avoiding looking directly at her. "As a real wife. If you want to, of course." It was an awkward, émouvant, but sincere invitation. Clara thought about the weeks that had passed, his small gestures, the way he had started to look at her differently. It wasn't love yet, but it was the beginning of, "I want to, but slowly, in our own time." Roderick relieved, slowly. Clara's move to the main bedroom was gradual, and first went clothes, then her personal belongings, until the sewing room reverted to being just. The children noted but didn't come. Some of the older ones exchanged knowing glances, understanding that something had changed between their parents. The relationship between Roderick and Clara gained new layers. They talked more, shared concerns about the children, planned the ranch's future together. He began to ask for her opinion on important decisions, and she felt valued, heard. One night, prepared for bed, Clara suddenly stopped in the middle of the room. "Roderick," her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something." He looked at, concerned by her tone. "What is it?" Clara took a deep breath, gathering courage. "When you wrote me that letter, the 20th one, it wasn't the first I received." "What do you mean?" "I received another one before," the words tumbling out. "Months, and I tore it up. Threw it away without why? Without anger, just curiosity. Because I thought it was crazy." Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. "Marrying a stranger, moving my children, starting everything over. It seemed too desperate, too dangerous." "Then why did you come back, Roderick? Why did you answer the second letter?" Clara looked at her own hands. "Because I went to the neighboring town to sell some embroidery and passed close by here. I saw you, from a distance, feeding your children in the yard. I saw a man trying to do everything alone, stumbling but not giving up. And I thought it was unfair that someone so alone had to be everything to everyone." The silence that followed was dense. Roderick processed the information, trying to understand his own feelings. "You came back out of pity." "No." Clara looked at him. "I came back out of respect, out of recognition, because I saw in you what I saw in the mirror, someone who doesn't give up, even when they should." Roderick took her hand. It was the first time they had made such an intimate gesture. "Thank you for coming back, for staying." Clara squeezed his hand back, and at that moment, both knew that their marriage of convenience was transforming into something. The following days were different. Small gestures of affection appear. A touch on the shoulder when passing by, a shared smile, longer conversation. The children noticed the change and were happy. The house felt lighter, more complete. But challenges were not lacking. The neighboring Carver farm faced a plague that threatened spread. Roderick gathered the other farmers to discuss containment. Clara participated in the meeting, something unusual for women at that time and place, but Roderick insisted that she had good ideas and should be heard. Initially, the other men resisted, but Clara spoke knowledgeably about controlled burns and crop rotation, knowledge she had learned from her late husband. In the end, her suggestions were accepted, and the plague was controlled before it spread. "You surprise me," Roderick said that night, admiration in his voice. "Because I'm a woman," she teased, "because you know much more than you let on." Serious. "And I'd like to know everything." Clara felt her heart quicken. "Everything?" "Everything," he confirmed, approaching slowly. It was their first kiss, shy, almost timid, but gentle, but genuine. When they separated, both were blushing like teenagers. "Took you long enough," Clara murmured, and Roderick, a rare and precious sound. The love between Roderick and Clara blossomed slowly, like a plant that needs time to grow strong roots. It wasn't a love of overwhelming passion, but of complicity day after day. They learned to truly know each other, their tastes, their fears, their quirks. Clara discovered that Roderick had nightmares, his first wife's death, waking up sweaty and trembling. She would calm him, hold his hand, say soft words until he fell back asleep. Roderick discovered that Clara had been afraid of storms since childhood when lightning struck near her. He would hold her during stormy nights, making her feel safe. The children, perceiving the change, reacted in different ways. Some were genuinely happy, like Helen, who now called Clara Mom without hesitation. Others, like Beatrice, had confused feelings, as if their father loving another woman was a betrayal of their real mother's memory. Roderick noticed his daughter's conflict and, one afternoon, asked her to walk with him to the cemetery where Marianne was buried. It was the first time they had been back in months. "Do you think he asked directly, looking at the simple headstone. Beatrice bit her lip, tears streaming down. "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like you're forgetting her." Roderick knelt beside his daughter. "I will never forget your mother. She was my first love. She gave me you and your siblings. She filled my life with joy. But she's gone, and life goes on. Clara isn't here to replace anyone. She's here because you and I and your siblings need someone, and because I deserve to be happy again. Don't you think?" Beatrice sobbed and hugged her father tightly. "Yes, I do. It's just hard." "I know," he squeezed, "but it will get easier, I promise." That conversation helped. Beatrice returned home lighter and, for the first time, truly hugged Clara without reservation. "Thank you for taking care of my father." Clara, emotional, returned the embrace. "Thank you for letting me be part of the family." Years began to pass more quick. The children grew, some already entering adolescence. Peter, at 17, began to work seriously alongside Roderick, learning the ranching trade. Beatrice, at 15, had become a beautiful and responsible young woman who helped Clara with the more complex household tasks. The ranch prospered. Roderick bought more land, expanded the cattle breeding, planted new coffee crops. Clara created a small production of preserves, jams, that she sold in the town, generating extra income. Together, they were an efficient and harmonious team. One evening, after a particularly good day of sales, Roderick surprised Clara with a gift. It was a small, carved wooden box. She opened it with curiosity and found inside a yellowed, worn letter. "It's the 20th, explained his voice, and the one I wrote that my last attempt. I kept it because, when you replied, I realized that letter had changed my life." Clara held the paper carefully, her eyes. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I want you to know," Roderick held her hand, "that what began as desperation transformed into gratitude, and gratitude into respect, and respect into love. I love you, Clara." Truly, those were the first of true love exchanged between them. Clara cried, hugged her husband, and replied with a choked voice, "I love you too, more than I thought I would be able to love again." That night, they carefully put the letter away, as a symbol of a journey that had begun in necessity and arrived at genuine love. 7 years had passed since Clara arrived at Three Palms. 7 years that felt both like a lifetime and the blink of an eye. The house that was once silent and cold, where echoes of loneliness filled the empty hallways, was now a true home. Laughter echoed through the rooms at any time of day. Typical large family arguments happened at meals. Doors constantly slammed with someone coming in or going out. and there was always movement, always life pulsing in every corner. Peter, Clara's eldest son, now 21, had married Lucy, a sweet girl from the neighboring town. 6 months. Roderick had built them a new house lands not far from the main house so they could stay close. Lucy was pregnant, their first, and Clara could hardly contain herself with joy at the prospect of being a grandma. She spent hours talking with her daughter-in-law about baby, knitting blankets, preparing the light. Beatrice, now a 19-year-old young woman, as beautiful as the mother she lost, was engaged to Raphael, the son of an honest merchant in town. The wedding was set for the next summer, and the house buzzed with preparation. Clara and Beatrice had become truly close in recent years. That initial resistance transformed into genuine complicity. They spent entire afternoons choosing fabric, discussing recipes for the feast, planning every detail of the ceremony. The younger ones continued to grow. Michael, Clara's son, was 17 and helped Roderick with the ranch administration, showing a natural talent for numbers and negotiation. Joel, Roderick's son of age, preferred manual labor, waking before the sun to tend to the animals. Anne, now 16, had revealed a talent for sewing and embroidery, selling her creations in town and saving money for her own dowry. Helen, Roderick's youngest, was 12, a joyful and chatty girl who no longer remembered her biological mother. For her, Clara had always been Mom, simple as that. Clara's youngest, 11-year-old twins named Luke and Laura, studied diligently, dreaming of possibilities their parents never had. Roderick, at 49, had grayer hair, especially at his temples, and some wrinkles around his eyes, but they were wrinkles of someone who had laughed, who had lived under the sun, who had known happiness after much pain. His body was still strong, though years of hard work were beginning to take their... Sometimes he felt aches in his back, in his knees, but nothing that prevented him from work. Clara, at 43, had gained some curves she didn't have when she arrived, a result of years of eating better, living with less worry. Her hands, once rough and wounded, remained hard-working but less battered. She had some white streaks in her dark hair, which Roderick loved to call silver threads. She would laugh and say they were strands of worry, but both knew they were just marks of the time shared. One autumn afternoon, Clara was in the kitchen preparing pumpkin preserve, a recipe she had perfected over the years, and that sold well, and the sweet scent filled the house, mixing with the aroma of fresh coffee that was always on the stove. Beatrice was beside her, learning the secrets of the perfect consistency, when Clara felt a sharp pain in her chest. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking it was just fatigue, but the pain increased, radiating to her left arm. The spoon clattered from her hand onto the wooden floor. Beatrice looked at her, startled. "Mom, Mom, what's wrong?" The girl held Clara by the arm. Clara tried to respond, but her legs gave out. The world spun, and the last thing she heard before collapsing was Beatrice's desperate cry for help. She woke up in her own bed, surrounded by worried faces. Roderick held her hand so tightly it almost hurt, his face pale, his eyes red. Dr. Davis, the regional doctor, was putting his instruments back into his leather satchel. "What happened?" Clara murmured, her voice weak. "You fainted," Roderick replied, his voice choked. "You gave me quite a scare, old woman." The doctor approached, his expression serious. "Mrs. Clara, your heart is very tight. You work too much. You worry too much. You carry too much weight. Rest. Let others do what you..." "But I feel fine," Clara, trying to... A wave of dizziness made her give up. "You're not fine now, and if you don't take care of yourself, you might not get another... Your heart needs rest. No heavy work, no lifting, no standing for hours. Rest, light food, and most importantly, peace of mind." Clara began. "The house will stand without you working yourself to death." Roderick, still holding her hand. "We have grown daughters, hired help. Everyone can assist. You just need to take care of the preserve I was making." Beatrice finished it. Roderick smiled faintly. "And it turned out good. She learned well from you." Clara looked around and saw all the children huddled at the bedroom door, their faces marked by worry. Even the youngest, who rarely stayed quiet, were silent, their eyes wide. It was then that she understood the seriousness of the situation. "But will she be okay?" Roderick asked the doctor, his voice trembling. "With care, will she be okay?" Dr. Davis placed a hand on his... "With adequate rest, medicine, and avoiding strenuous activity. Yes, but I can't promise anything if she doesn't follow instruction. The heart is a muscle that can also tire, Roderick, and hers has worked too hard." In the following days, The house reorganized. Beatrice took over a large part of the kitchen with the help of her younger sister. Anne became responsible for sewing and mending. Peter and Michael took turns supervising the production of preserves that Clara sold. Roderick hired 2 more helpers for cleaning and laundry. Clara, accustomed to managing everything, to being present in every detail, had to learn to delegate. It was difficult. Several times she tried to get up to just take a quick look, or help a little, but Roderick was unyielding, would carry her back to bed, cover her firmly and say, "You stay here. Things will happen with or without you micromanaging. But what if they do it wrong? Then they'll learn from their mistakes, just like you learned, just like I learned. No one is born knowing everything, Clara," she huffed, annoyed, but deep down she knew he was right. And slowly, very slowly, she began to let go of the reins, to trust that the house would continue to function even without her controlling every detail. At night, Roderick would lie beside her, always checking if she was comfortable, if she needed anything, if the chest pain had returned. One night, after ensuring she had taken the medicine the doctor prescribed, he held her hand in the dark. "You gave me quite a scare," his voice low. "When Beatrice screamed, when I came running and saw you on the floor, I thought I was losing you. I thought I'd be alone again." Clara squeezed his hand. "You won't get rid of me that easily?" "I don't want to get rid of you," he turned to her. "I want you here, with me, for a long time yet. I want to see our grandchildren grow up. I want to grow old with you on the porch, complaining about my aching back, and you telling me I'm being dramatic." Clara laughed softly, then grew serious. "You know we don't control that, right?" The doctor was clear. "My heart is tired, care of it, can rest, but—" "No," Roderick interrupted. "Don't say that. You'll be fine. You'll take good care of yourself, you'll rest, you'll take your medicine, and you have to be." She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, his genuine fear of losing another wife. I'll do everything the doctor, but you also have to promise me something." "What?" "That if anything happens to me, you won't close your heart again. You won't isolate yourself. You'll keep living. You'll keep being a father. You'll keep caring for this beautiful family we built." "Clara, promise." Roderick hesitated, but finally nodded. "I promise you won't need it, because you'll be—" Days turned into weeks. Clara recovered little by little, regaining her strength, regaining color in her face, but she was different, more fragile, more tired, less willing to do everything alone. She accepted the help, accepted the rest, accepted that she was no longer the same woman who had arrived years strong at the difficult. She began to sit on the porch afternoons, knitting with the baby, watching ranch life unfold. Her daughters came to keep her company, bringing embroidery, bringing conversations, bringing laughter. Her sons stopped by to kiss her forehead, to share news, to ask for advice. Roderick adjusted his routine to spend more time nearby. He worked half days in the fields, then returned to have lunch with her, to talk, to simply be together. They discovered they had much to talk about after years focused only on surviving and working. "Oh, Cobb, did you know I wanted to be a teacher?" commented one of those afternoons. "When I was a girl, I dreamed of teaching children to read." "I didn't know," Roderick surprised. "Why didn't you?" "Life," she shrugged. "I married young. Children came soon after. I had no time or money to study, but sometimes I wonder what it would have been like." "You would have been a good teacher, patient. You know how to explain things. Look how you taught everything to our daughters. I like it." "They are." He held her. "Ours." In one of these conversations, Clara mentioned something she had never told him. Roderick was peeling an orange for her, carefully cutting the segments so she wouldn't have to exert herself. "Do you know what struck me most when I first arrived here?" she asked suddenly. Roderick stopped what he was doing. "What?" "It was when John asked if I was the new mommy." She smiled with tears in her. He was so small, so hopeful. "And I knelt in front of him and said I would try. At that moment, I had no idea if I could do it. I was terrified of failing, of disappointing everyone, of not being enough." "And you were enough?" The plate with peeled orange in her hand. "You were more than enough, but I didn't know that then. I just knew I had to try. Every single day, I would wake up and think, today I will try again. When Beatrice yelled at me about the rice, I thought about giving up. When the boys fought and blamed me, I thought about leaving. When loneliness hit at night, I thought I had stayed. I stayed because you were also trying. I saw you taking care of everyone, working until you dropped, and I thought, if he doesn't give up, I can't either." We held on to each. Roderick reflected on her words. "You're right. There were days I only didn't break down because I knew you were here, counting on me, that if I faltered, you'd be overwhelmed. So I got up and kept going. We were strong for each other," Clara concluded, "until we could be strong together. It was one of the most honest conversations they had, without exaggerated romanticism, without overly beautiful words, just the raw truth of two people who met in necessity and built something solid from there. Time, however, continued its relentless march. Clara gradually recovered, but everyone knew she wouldn't be exactly the same as before. The scare had left marks not only on her, but on the entire family. Everyone became more careful, more attentive, more present. Roderick, observing his wife's fragility, began to feel the weight of his own years. At 50, the aches were once occasional became constant companions. His knees hurt after a day of work in the fields. His close vision was blurring. His hands would sometimes tremble, especially on cold mornings. One morning, as he got out of bed, his right knee gave out and he almost fell. Clara, who was adjusting the pillows, held his arm with surprising strength for someone recovering. "Careful!" she exclaimed, and startled. Roderick leaned on her, embarrassed. "My knee locked up. It's past now." "It's past nothing." Sit back. "You need to see a doctor, too." "It's nothing. Just old age catching up." "Old age is precisely why you need to see a doctor," with that tone that brooked no argument. "I'll send Peter to fetch Dr. Davis." The doctor came the next afternoon and examined Roderick carefully. He tested his reflexes, blood pressure, vision, asked pains, sleep, diet. "You're healthy for a 50-year-old man who's worked hard his entire life," the doctor concluded, "but you're not 20 anymore. This body needs care, less heavy work, more rest, and those knees need a walking support, especially when walking on uneven ground." "A walking It's not a matter of being old. It's a matter of being sensible. Better to use a stick now than to fall, break your hip, and be bedridden." "I've seen it happen." Clara nodded vigorously. "I'll have a nice walking stick made for you from fine wood. It will have style." Roderick looked at his wife, at the doctor, and sighed in defeat. "All right, but nothing too flashy. I don't want to look like I'm showing off." In the following weeks, both adjusted to the new reality. Roderick used the walking stick when he went out, especially on cold mornings when his joints ached more. Clara continued with her medicine, her afternoons of rest, her lighter routine. They grew old together, and there was a strange beauty in it. "We're getting old," Roderick did one after, watching their grandchildren play. Peter already had 2 children now, Gabriel, 2 years old, and Marina, a few months old. Beatrice was pregnant, her belly already quite prominent under her dress. "We are," sitting beside him, a blanket over her legs despite the warm day. But it's good to grow old by your side. Do you regret it?" he asked suddenly, turning to her. "Coming, staying, tying your life to mine." Clara stopped knitting and looked at him intently. "Why are you asking that?" "Because you could be somewhere else," he said, vulnerable. "You could have found someone younger, stronger, more what?" She interrupted him. "Richer? I don't need wealth beyond what we have. Younger? Youth fades. Stronger? Strength wanes with the years. What matters is what remains, Roderick, and what grew between us is true." "Never," he insisted, "never regretted it." "Never?" She was categorical. "Not a single day, not even during our worst arguments, not even in the hardest moments, not even when I thought it wouldn't work out. I never regretted it. And you? Writing those letters?" Roderick thought before answering. "It insisting on the 20th even after 19 refusals. Bringing you and your children here?" "Yes." She waited for "It was the best decision I ever made. The second best was marrying you for real, instead of letting it be just an agreement." "Only the second," a playful glint in her eye. "The first," he took her hand, intertwining their fingers, "was allowing myself to fall for you. It would have been easier to keep my distance, to maintain the practical agreement. But I chose to open up. I chose to risk my heart again, and it was the best thing I ever did." Clara felt her eyes sting. After so many years together, he could still surprise her with sincere words. "I fell for you too. It wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't magical. It was gradual, built day after day. But when I realized it, I was completely in love." "When did you realize?" he asked, curious. Clara thought, way going back in time. "Remember that night Helen was sick and you stayed up with me? You fell asleep in the kitchen chair, the girl in your lap, completely exhausted but still holding her. I looked at you at that moment and thought, this man has a huge heart. And that's when I started to fall. I didn't know. Emotion." "And you?" she asked. "When did you realize?" Roderick, revisiting memories. "It was when you had that argument with Beatrice. You didn't yell, you didn't hit, you didn't curse. You asked her how her mother did it and said you would learn. At that moment, I saw that you weren't here to take anyone's place. You were here to add to it, and that completely disarmed me." They fell into a comfortable silence, just enjoying each other's company. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The yard grew quiet as the children were called inside. Soon it would be time for dinner, for the whole family to gather around the table. The ranch was now run mainly by Peter and Michael, with more distant supervision from Roderick. The two young men complemented each other well. Peter was cautious and a planner. Michael was bold and innovative. Together, they were expanding the business, planting new crops, modernizing. Roderick and Clara had retired from the heaviest task, but they were still the center of the family. They were still consulted for important decisions, still offered advice based on decades' experience, and most importantly, they were still the living example that love can be born of necessity and flourish in daily choice. One special evening, a few weeks after that conversation, Peter gathered the entire family for dinner. He said he had an important announcement. The large table, which once barely accommodated 14 people, now struggled to fit everyone. There were spouses, young grandchildren in high chairs, extended family. The house was full of life, noise, and joy. When everyone was seated, Peter stood up, his wife Lucy by his side. "I want to thank all of you for being here," he began, emotional. "But especially I want to thank two people." Roderick exchanged confused glances. "Mom," Peter looked, "were 36 when you accepted a crazy invitation from a man you'd never seen. You brought 6 children on a 2-day journey with no guarantee of what you would find. You were the bravest woman I've ever..." Clara gripped the napkin tightly in her hand, already feeling the tears coming. "And Roderick," Peter turned to it, "you accepted us as if we were your own. Never, not once, did you make us feel different from your blood children. You taught me to work, to be a man, to be a father. Everything I am today, I owe to both of you, all of us. Also, when my mother died, I thought our family was 12 and trying to be an adult, trying to take care of everyone. Clara arrived and I hated it. I hated it because I thought she was stealing my mother's place." Roderick saw his hand at the table. "But I was wrong," Chris continued, openly crying. "So Clara didn't steal. She created a new place. She taught me that it's possible to have more than one mother, to love more than once, to build more than one family. Thank you, Clara. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was horrible to you." Clara could no longer hold back her tears. She stood up, ignoring Roderick's protests about exerting herself, and hugged Beatrice tightly. The two cried together, holding each other close. Years of feelings finally put into words. One by one, the children, all 13, from both marriages, stood up to give their own speeches. They spoke about how the union of that couple had saved not just one family, 2. About how they learned that family is built with choice and dedication, not just with blood. About how witnessing that love grow gradually shaped their own views on relationships. When everyone finished, Roderick asked for silence. He stood up with difficulty, leaning on his walking stick and on Clara, and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," his voice still firm despite his age and emotion, "to family, to our family, which began, broken, and rebuilt itself, which began in necessity and flourished in love." "To family," everyone responded in unison, raising their glass. "But especially," Roderick continued, looking directly at Clara, "I want to thank the woman who accepted a crazy invitation from a desperate man, who wrote letters at dawn, who came from afar with 6 children and a heart full of courage, who transformed a house full of mourning into a complete home of life, who taught me that love doesn't have to be instantaneous to be true, who showed me that starting over is always worth it." To emotion continue. Clara stood up and went to him, taking his free hand. "You were the 20th letter," Roderick concluded, looking into her eyes, "but the first truth of my life." The emotional silence that followed was absolute. Then someone began to applaud, and soon everyone was applauding, some crying, others smiling, all moved by that simple but profound declaration. That night, after the party ended, after the younger ones went to bed and those who lived elsewhere left, Roderick and Clara slowly climbed the stairs to their room. The effort of the celebration had left them exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion of those who had lived fully. They lay side by side, as they had every night for years. In the dark, fingers intertwined, they listened to the last sounds of the ranch quieting down. "Do you remember," Clara murmured, "that first day when I arrived? I was so nervous, so scared. I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life." "And did you?" Roderick, stroking the back of her hand with his thumb. I did, but it was the best, the only one that was worth every second of fear. I was terrified. Chicamais, when I saw you step down from that carriage with 6 children, I thought, what have I done? How will I make this work? But John ran to you and asked if you were the new mommy, and you knelt and said you would try. That's when I knew. Knew what? That it would work out, he said. Because anyone who promises to try, instead of promising to be, is being honest, and honesty is the foundation of everything. Clara smiled in the dark. And we tried. Didn't we? So much. There were days we almost gave up. Almost, he agreed. But we didn't give up, because we're stubborn, because we love each other, she corrected. That too, he admitted, pulling her closer. They fell asleep like that, intertwined, after 20 official years and 23 since they met. 2 people whom fate brought together in necessity, and whom choice kept united in love. The years continued their inexorable march. Roderick and Clara grew old together, their lives so intertwined that it was impossible to think of one without the other. He began to use the walking stick permanently, not out of lost vanity, but out of real necessity. She needed glasses for all tasks, not just for sewing. Both had good days, when they seemed younger, and bad days, when the weight of the years was impossible to ignore. But they faced everything together. When Roderick woke in the middle of the night with back pain, Clara prepared a warm compress and massaged the area with patience. When Clara had anxiety attacks about her health, about her children, about life, Roderick held her hands and reminded her of everything they had already overcome together. Three Palms Ranch continued to prosper under the administration of the new generation. Peter managed the day-to-day with a firm but fair hand. Michael handled the financial side and innovations. Beatrice and her husband Raphael lived on a neighboring property, but always came for Sunday lunches. The other children, now adults, were spread between the ranch and other towns, but maintained constant contact. The grandchildren multiplied. Gabriel, the eldest, was already 5 years old and followed his grandfather Roderick everywhere, fascinating stories of the ranch. Marina was 3 and was the joy of the house with her contagious laugh. Beatrice had given birth to a girl named Mary Ann in honor of Roderick's first wife, in a gesture that touched everyone and showed that past and present could coexist harmoniously. More grandchildren came. Michael and his wife Carmen had twins. Anne had a girl. Joel married and soon announced he would be a father. The main house was full on weekends, with children running, adults talking, abundant food on the table. One particularly beautiful autumn afternoon, with a clear sky and fresh air, the whole family spontaneously gathered. There was no special occasion, just the desire to be together. Roderick and Clara were on the porch, as always, observing the activity. "Have you ever thought," Clara, adjusting the blanket, "what it would be like if I hadn't answered that letter? If I had thrown it away as I did with the first one? I do think about it, watching Gabriel play with his cousins in the yard. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and think about it, and I thank you every day for having the courage." It wasn't courage, Clara, as she had before. It was destiny. We were destined. "Do you believe in destiny?" he asked, turning to her with genuine. After so much time together, they still discovered new things about each other. "I believe in choices," she replied, thoughtfully, "and in their consequences. You chose to write 20 letters when many would have given up on the 5th. I chose to come back and respond when I had already refused once, and then we chose every day to stay together, to work together, to build together. That is stronger than destiny. That is commitment." Roderick reflected on her words for a long moment. "You've always been wiser than me." "No," she laughed softly, that gentle laugh he loved so much. "I just lived a little longer before I met you. I learned some things the hard way." The sun was rising, painting the sky in golden and pink hues that only the countryside knows. The ranch yard awoke with familiar sounds, roosters crowing, cows mooing in the distance, horses whinnying in the stables, grandchildren ran in morning games, daughters-in-law prepared breakfast, big kitchen, sons-in-law attended to the first chores of the day. Life continued, vibrant and beautiful as it always. "Thank you," interrupting the comfortable silence. "For what?" Clara looked at him, intrigued. "For everything, Seer," his voice laden with emotion. "For every day I woke up and you were here. For every shared meal. For every smile on difficult mornings. For every word of support when I thought about giving up. For every difficulty we faced hand in hand. For making my life complete in a way I didn't even know was possible." Clara felt tears stream freely down her wrinkled face, but they were happy tears. "Thank you," she replied, her voice choked, "for giving me a family when I thought would only have obligation, for teaching me that it's never too late to start over, for showing me that love can grow slowly and still be true, for loving me the way I am, with my flaws and fears." They remained there, hand in hand, watching the new day fully illuminate the two people who met in desperation, remained in necessity, and flourished in true love. Two souls who learned that courage is not in fighting against pain, but in remaining not in starting when everything is uncertain, but in continuing when everything gets hard. The months passed in relative tranquility. There were moments of concern, like when Roderick had a fall that kept him resting. There were moments of joy, like when two more great-grandchildren were born in the same week. There was the normal routine of a large family: small arguments, reconciliations, celebration, mourning for acquaintances who passed away. One spring morning, exactly 20 years at that simple wedding in the chapel, the whole family gathered again. This time it was a planned Roderick and Clara's China anniversary. 20 years of official marriage, though everyone knew the real union was even older. The party was large, organized mainly by Beatrice and the other daughters. They decorated the yard with flowers, prepared a feast with all the couple's favorite foods, invited neighbors, friends, everyone who of the history of Three Palms. Roderick, de Turanchas, wore his best suit, even if it was a little. Clara wore a new dress that her daughters insisted on making. Light blue, her hair was gray now, as was his, but both were radiant. During the party, each child wanted to give us. Beatrice, always the most, was the first. She spoke about her initial resistance, about how she learned to love Clara, about how witnessing that marriage had shaped her own relationship with Raphael. Peter spoke about gratitude, about second chances, about how Roderick had given him not just a home, but an example of an honorable man. Michael, Anne, Joel, Helen, the twins Luke and Laura, all shared memories, lessons learned, memorable moments. When it was Roderick's turn to speak, he stood up with difficulty, leaning on his walking stick and on Clara. The entire yard fell silent, everyone attentive. 20 years ago, he began, his voice still firm despite his age. I was in the chapel of this ranch, marrying a woman I barely knew. I made vows. I promised to care. I promised to respect. But I didn't promise love because, honestly, I didn't know if love was possible after so much loss. He paused, looking at Clara beside him. I was wrong, he continued. Love was not only possible, but came in a way I never expected. It didn't come like thunder, sudden and overwhelming. It came like dawn, gradual, slowly illuminating every dark corner. It came in daily care, in nightly conversation, in challenges faced side by side. It came when I least expected it and settled in to stay. Clara gripped his hand tightly. Clara, he turned completely to her now, ignoring everyone else. You have given me 20 years of joy. You have given me expanded children, precious grandchildren, a house full of life. You gave me purpose. I thought there was none left. You gave me love when I thought I didn't deserve it anymore. Thank you for answering that letter. Thank you for staying. Thank you for loving me back. There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. Clara stood up, forgetting the medical recommendation, and hugged her husband with all the strength They stayed like, holding each other tight, while the family applauded and cheered. That night, when the party ended, and everyone had gone home or to bed, Roderick and Clara went up to their room. The effort of the celebration had left them exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion of those who had lived fully. They lay side by side, as they had every night for years. In the dark, fingers intertwined, they heard the last sounds of the ranch quiet. Do you remember, Clara murmured, that first day when I arrived? I was so nervous, so scared. I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life. And did you? Roderick, stroking the back of her hand with his thumb. I did, but it was the best, the only one that was worth every second of. Was terrified too. When I saw you step down from that carriage with children, I thought, what have I done? How will I make this work? But John ran to you and asked if you were the new mommy, and you knelt and said you would try. That's when I knew. Knew what? That it would work out, because anyone who promises instead of promising is being honest, and honesty foundation of everything. Clara smiled. And we tried, didn't we? So much. There were days we almost gave up. Almost, he agreed. But we didn't give up, because we're stubborn. Because we love each other, she corrected. That too, he admitted, pulling her closer. They fell asleep like intertwined, after 20 official years, and two people whom fate brought together in necessity and whom choice kept you in love. The following years were gentle as much as possible. Roderick developed more serious knee problems and needed a wheelchair for longer distance. Clara had another heart scare, but again recovered. They aged, inevitably, but together, always together. Three Palms Ranch officially passed into Peter's safe hands. Roderick signed the trembling hands, passing the legacy to the next generation. It was a bittersweet moment of letting go, but also of pride in seeing the continuity. The grandchildren grew, some already teenagers. Gabriel, at 12, just was already helping with ranch chores. Marina, at 10, showed a talent for drawing and painted beautiful pictures of the property. Great-grandchildren began to appear, completing the cycle of generation. One quiet afternoon, Roderick and Clara were on the porch, a position they occupied almost daily for decades. The weather was perfect, neither cold nor hot, just pleasant. Gabriel was in the yard teaching his younger cousins how to lasso a wooden stump. Clara observed. "Do you think," watching his grandson intently, "the way he teaches, patient, you taught Peter that way, Peter taught Gabriel that way. It's beautiful to see it passed down from generation to generation. And Marina has your way," Roderick reciprocated. "Observant, quiet, but taking everything in. She'll be wise like—" "I'm not wise," Clara. "I'm just old." "You are wise, always have been, ever since that first day when you knew exactly what to say to John. Wisdom doesn't come from age. It comes from experience lived attentively." Clara just continued watching the children. After a long silence, she said, "Have you ever thought about how will what be? The end, when one of us is gone?" Roderick. "But it has to happen. One of us will remain, probably for a short time, but will remain." Clara, "No," she interrupted him gently. "Let me speak. If I go first, you need to continue. Continue being a grandfather, being a father, being you. You can't close yourself off again like you did when Marianne died. Promise." "We already promised that years ago." "Promise again," she insisted. "I promise," he conceded. "But you also need to promise, if I go first, you continue. Continue taking care of everyone. Continue being the heart of this house. Promise?" "I promise." They fell silent. A heavier silence. The reality of mortality hung over them, impossible to ignore. "Do you know what Clara said after a while. "When the time comes?" "What?" "I want to be buried beside you, and I want them to plant flowers over. Yellow flowers, like the ones you gave me on our 10th anniversary. Sunflowers," he remembered, touched by the memory. "Sunflowers?" she confirmed. "So we'll always have sun, even under the earth." "That's a beautiful request," he said, squeezing her hand. "And I want the same thing, to be buried beside you, so we can continue together, no matter where." "We'll put it in the will," Clara decided. "Practical even in an emotional—" "We will?" Months turned into years once more. Both their health fluctuated. Roderick had a mild stroke that temporarily affected his speech. Clara had another heart scare, but again recovered. They aged, inevitably, but together, always together. One night, lying in bed as always, Roderick suddenly said, "I've had a good life." Clara, who was almost asleep, opened her eyes. "Have you?" "I have. I have a good life. But when I look back, I see that it was worth it. The pains, the losses, the fears. Everything was worth it because I'm here." "To where?" "To you, simply." Everything in my life led me to that dawn when I wrote the 20th letter, and that letter led me to you, and you led me here, to now, to this beautiful family we built. So yes, it was worth it." Clara cried in silence, too emotional to speak. She just hugged her husband, feeling his warmth, solidity, his presence. "I've had a good life, too," she finally managed. "Better than I deserved, better than I ever dreamed." "You deserved it," he corrected. "You always deserved happiness, love, peace. And I'm happy to have been the person who could give you that. We gave each other. It was a trade, always." They fell asleep, embraced, two hearts beating in sync after more than 2.5 decades. Hearts that chose to beat together since that distant day when fate united them through a letter. The following years were gentle as much as possible. There was no prolonged suffering, no unbearable pain, just the natural decline of bodies that had lived full lives. When Roderick finally passed away at 68, it was peacefully. He fell asleep one summer afternoon and simply didn't wake up. Clara was by his side, as she always had been. She was holding his hand. She felt his last breath, his last beat. She didn't scream, didn't despair. She just gently closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for everything. Thank you for writing that letter. Thank you for loving me, Rest, my love. Rest. I'll be fine. I'll take care of our family until I can join you." The funeral was immense. People from all over the region came to pay their respects to the man who had built Three Palms Ranch, who had raised a beautiful family, who had been an example of integrity and love. Clara, supported by her children, remained strong throughout the ceremony. Only when his coffin was lowered into the earth under the oak tree as he had requested did she allow her tears to fall freely. As she had promised, Clara continued. She lived 2 more years after Roderick's passing. They were years of longing, but also fullness. She watched her grandchildren grow, met a few more great-grandchildren, attended a few more weddings. She remained present, active as much as possible. Being the heart of the family as Roderick when her time at 61 harks on a spring morning full of flowers, Clara was surrounded by her entire family. Everyone was able to say goodbye, to tell her how he loved her, to thank her for everything presented. Her last words, whispered to Beatrice, who held her hand, were, "It was the 20th letter, but the first truth of." They buried her beside Roderick, under the same oak tree, fulfilling both their wishes. Sunflowers were planted around them, yellow flowers that seek the sun, eternal in their renewal. The simple yet beautiful headstone bore their name, a single inscription that captured the essence of all they had lived. They chose to stay. Years later, decades later, Three Palms Ranch continued. It had passed into Gabriel's hands, then to his children. The oak tree had grown even larger, its roots as deep as those of the family it sheltered beneath. The sunflowers continued to bloom every spring, vibrant yellow over the earth that held 2 hearts that beat together. On Sunday afternoons, the whole family gathered. The children where John had once run. The adults talked on the porch where Clara had spent hours, and always someone would tell the story of the 20th letter, the story of how love can be born of necessity and flourish in the daily choice to remain. In the gentle breeze of those afternoons, the sound of children's laughter mingled with the bird song, and the world seemed, for an instant, to understand the true meaning of courage, not to fight against pain, but to remain despite it, not to start when everything is uncertain, but to continue when everything gets hard, not to love when it's easy, but to choose to love every day, in all circumstances. And so Roderick and Clara's story lived on, passed down from generation to generation, reminding everyone that family isn't just blood, but choice, that love isn't just a feeling, but a commitment, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to try even with fear. Three Palms Ranch remained, a silent yet eloquent witness that it's worth believing in new beginnings, that the 20th attempt can be the right one, that 2 broken people can come together and become whole, that true love, the kind that sustains generation, is built day after day, choice after choice, gesture after gesture. And under the oak tree, where Roderick and Clara rested side by side, the sunflowers continued to turn towards the sun, eternal in their dance, eternal in their search for light, like 2 hearts that found in each other the light they needed to flourish. And so ends the story of Roderick and Clara, a couple who taught us that true love doesn't always arise from instantaneous passion, but can flourish from the daily choice to remain, to try to build together. If this narrative touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments which part moved you the most. Your interaction helps us continue to bring stories that warm the soul and make us believe in the power of love and family. Until the next story, may it also bring reflection and emotion.